It's a delight to be back here. I'm an alumni of the Graduate School of Business as well as the Graduate School of Education, so it's always wonderful to be back here. So as was mentioned, I'm Ton-Quinlivan, Vice Chancellor for Workforce and Digital Futures of the largest higher education system in the nation. We have 114 community colleges, one in every backyard, serving 2.1 million students. But before this role, I actually was in the private sector and was head of workforce development for a company of 20,000 men and women, and actually was solving the talent shortage issues, ranging from shortage in engineers to technicians, and so was doing this work from the other side of the house and leveraged that knowledge and how we actually leverage the public infrastructure in order to build a reliable, diverse, and qualified talent pool in this work here with the California community colleges. Delighted to share the systems experimentation that we have been doing in order to really get the system to focus on the great needs that we have right now to address workforce shortages. So just some quick stats. I'm sure you see a lot of stats today, a lot of jobs open where there's a mismatch between what employers want and what workers have in California. Now, I'm sure because of all of our training, I suspect that the average number of degrees here in this room is at least like 2.5, if not like 4. So one thing I have to recalibrate is that the labor market and the perception of the labor market has really changed over the last few decades. In the 70s, if you got a high school degree, you could get access a good living, put food on the table for the family. But now the labor market has changed in terms of the gateway. So we're heading towards where 2/3 of the job openings in the US will require some level of post-secondary education. So that's not surprising to the folks that are in the room. Another statistics is that the country actually grew 63 million new jobs over the last few decades, but there's 2 million less jobs if you have a high school degree or less. So the structure of the labor market has changed a lot. Now, all of us will jump naturally, because of our academic training, will jump to the conclusion that all these openings are in the baccalaureate and above level, so you need a bachelor and above. And that is true in California. We have a gap of 1 million and more bachelor and above degrees. But equal in size is this area called the middle skills jobs. So these are the jobs that are trained, where you need more than a high school degree, but less than a 4-year degree. So this is in the area of associate's degrees, certificates, and industry-valued credentials. So let me pause for a moment and just have you think. If you were to get into a car accident, who is the first to arrive? Ambulance, yes. So the emergency medical technicians, they're trained in the middle skills. The person who checks you in at the hospital is trained middle skilled. The people who are reading your stats, doing sonograms, all those technicians that are using all the technology, those are all trained through associate's degrees, certificates, and industry-valued credentials. Let me give you another scenario. There's a big storm. Tree gets, in the middle of the night, tree knocks down your power line. Who comes to your house? Electrical power line technician. They're trained through the middle skills. So, we sort of assume that these these skilled workers exist in our environment, but I think those of us who are trained through the 4-year pathway and haven't touched this middle skill area, what I wanted to do is just give you an appreciation of how much we rely on these skilled workers just to have our everyday life. Now, what's so complicated about California is that, the size of LA alone, the LA County is bigger than some other states. So the conundrum for us was, how do you take a state as big as California, and in order for us to do a good job at matching employment and the training and education that leads into those high demand area, how do you match the two? Because those will lead to successful student outcomes. So what we actually ventured was restructuring California into regional economies and looking at different labor market needs. What industry sectors drove each regional economy so that we could really focus the assets and resources of the 114 community colleges. So we asked each of the regions to prioritize the top sectors. And as a result, 14 out of the 15 regions picked healthcare. 14 out of the 15 regions picked ICT, digital media. 8 out of the 15 regions picked advanced manufacturing. You know, there's advanced transportations, life science, global trade and logistics, retail hospitality, agriculture, water, small business. So many sectors that drive the economy, but they differ in priority based on your region. What we were able to do was based on restructuring against a unifying framework called doing what matters for jobs and economy. So doing what matters for jobs and economy, we were able to shift the state's focus from having workforce as an afterthought to actually having workforce to become a state policy priority. And in doing that process, when I first came on board in this job, some of these monies had been cut as much as in half, and some had been placed into what they call flex, which meant you didn't even have to use it for workforce. But as a result of this focus on doing what matters for jobs and economy, we went from 100 million to 200 million to 700 million, and last year to 900 million. And then in that process, the state asked us to consolidate the apprenticeship program, which we did, and they added a little bit more money. They asked us to integrate all the adult education programs to focus on workforce, which we did, and they added more money. And then more recently, we regionalized and the coordination of delivery of career education, which we did, and they added more money. And so there's been a lot of system change in order to really refocus on delivering against a skilled workforce, a strong workforce, one that drives regional economies, but also advances social mobility. Now, in looking back in the last 5 years and what's worked and not worked, I wanted to share with you just sort of three observations and 3 learnings that we did right. The first was that we actually cultivated an ecosystem of entrepreneurs as one of the strategies to deliver this system change. The second, we developed and unleashed a set of tools to free the data. When I first came on this job, they said, "Vaughn, you must free the data." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And they said, there's a massive amount of data, but it's not about the quantity of data. Clearly, there's a lot of data, but it's actually the visualization data so that practitioners can actually make use of it. And so that's the significance of the tools. And then thirdly, are innovations that scale. And I'll explain this in a little bit. So ecosystem of entrepreneurs. What we did was we actually borrowed from the playbook of the venture capital world, which was to focus on key talents and hiring key talents so that they would be the entrepreneurs that solve problems on the ground, because they can have the relationship and they can have the critical thinking needed in order to debug some very complicated structural problems. And under the framework of doing what matters for jobs and economy, we shifted our investment to focus only in 3 areas. First was industry sectors. So we retained people who would be single point of contacts for employers in order to navigate our colleges, which colleges are interested and have the competencies to do what the training and workforce development, and then the employer needs. So that relationship was, the glue was that these industry, we call them sector navigators. Secondly is region. So we focused on region because no one college within a region can solve all the workforce problems alone. And if you imagine, in the area of San Diego, there's 11 community colleges. In LA, 18 community colleges. In the Bay Area, 28 community colleges. If you can harness the collective power of this many institutions and be able to coordinate who gets to do what specialization, you could actually be able to begin to solve workforce needs very systematically. So the second was hiring against regions. And then the last is technical assistance. So where the field needed help, For example, in data tools, we would deploy a whole network along technical assistance to support them. So this ecosystem of entrepreneurs began working, and they're creating all sorts of models, and those models begin to replicate because they're all networked together. And that's the beauty of an ecosystem, isn't it? That they learn from each other. And so we've wired them instead of just between college CEOs, which is how it had normally been. Now there's all these networks by sector or by region or by certain technical assistance area. And so we're beginning to see a replication of innovation, some of which I'll explain in a second. The next was this tools to free the data. You know, California was a total laggard in terms of data and data system. But in the launching of this tool called Launchboard, which was to be able to show to the practitioners in our colleges how students are faring on every single course and certificate program. How much did students make 2 years before they came in, 2 years and 5 years after? And then did they get the employment outcomes, the workforce outcomes that was desired? This level of transparency for the institution was very helpful. And as you know, within most academic institutions, action happens when the faculty decides that they want it to happen. So part of this is changing the narrative of the conversation. I remember one institution down in San Diego, they saw their data. They said, oh, great, all the seats are filled. We're doing great. All the students are completing. We're doing great. How come none of them got a job, right? And that's when they took a pause and began to reevaluate what they were offering. So tools to free the data is a critical element in system change. And then taking advantage of our scale, you know, we used to make investments where it's just one college at a time. Hey, who wants to get this grant and solve this problem? But some of these issues in the workforce area are so big that we said, all right, let's give up on this one college at a time thing. Let's try 10 colleges at a time and see if you can begin solving this problem at scale. So in the middle, you see the new world of work. I have been in both the private sector and in this role in many, many advisory meetings where the employers would complain about soft skills of the students, right? Many of you in the audience would probably nod your head. So we issued a challenge. Can 10 colleges step in and start solving this soft skills issue? So what they did was develop this, and these top 10 skills were what employers informed. And when we asked them to also experiment with badging, and as a result, the using of the badging platform where the employers can verify and award badges when they see evidence of those skills, that was recognized as a promising practice by Mozilla Foundation. And practical application, Apple Retail, for example, came to us and said, we love those skills. Those are exactly the skills that we hire for. And so now we have 8 community colleges paired with 8 Apple Retail stores where upon finishing both the Retail Ready program, Apple structured a custom capstone on top of that, and then our students get a private URL to apply for jobs. So, you know, this kind of experimentation has allowed us to begin solving some of the workforce problem at scale. So we've gone from 10 to now 22 colleges, and it's heading to about 35. The next one on the far right is the makerspace. How many of you know about the maker movement? Fabulous, right? So wonderful learning environment that encourages what I call the creative economy skills: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, and a sprinkle of entrepreneurship. So we thought, well, why should Stanford and MIT have the monopoly on this? So we encouraged and set out a call to action, and now brought in 56 colleges to learn about the maker movement. And at the end of the planning process, 24 colleges are moving towards building out maker spaces and incorporating that learning environment into our programming. So this is the largest scale deployment of maker spaces within higher education. And then on the far left, I have to say this because students don't know the full range of education option. You know, In most communities, we know about the teachers, the policemen, the social workers, the early childhood care workers, but nobody knows about the health informatics technician or the medical sonographers or the water treatment technicians, right? These are these are not careers that you see on television. So it's really important for our K-12 partners and all partners to have folks go through career exploration. So what we did was, with a Kellogg grant, we went into the Inland Empire with an organization called the Young Invincibles. Inland Empire is in the shadows of LA, community next to LA, highest population of Latinos, also lowest education attainment rate in the state, and we wanted them to test the mobile app that does career exploration. And so what they discovered here was students wanted to do a career exploration around 3 themes. One is earning power, the second was 50-mile commuting radius, and the third was my areas of interest. So this mobile app allows you to explore all of our careers, but also the 4-year careers, and it's free on iTunes. So the more that we can have our K-12 partners do this work, the better that students will make decisions. And then just a quick few other things. We talked about an increase in money, and we talked about data, and it's really important to have transparency in data. So we borrow from sort of the latest technologies in Silicon Valley. Instead of reports coming back to us at the state by our colleges on how they use money, and then we'll file it somewhere in some black cabinet, we actually made it entirely transparent. Every single piece of data is made available on the web so that all the partners to whom we are accountable can read this, and they can choose to co-invest or they can choose to reshape their investment. We also put a great emphasis on labor market research. All of it is publicly available so that you can search, whether it's facilities managers in San Diego, dietitians, or by region, by occupation, or by keywords. The success metric, we also evolved our student success metrics. In most academic institutions, it's completion, like completion of certificate degree, or transfer to a 4-year institution. But in the world of workforce, we added 3 more in the last few years. We care very much about whether students get jobs, whether they make an increase in earnings, and or whether they break living wage, right? And so these 5 outcomes became incorporated into a performance-based funding formula called the positive incentive. And so kicking in starting this year, colleges get a portion of their funding based on how much they contribute to positive workforce outcomes for the region. And then lastly, because we invested in those tools and data system, we now actually can see programs that have demonstrable outcomes. Some of it is quite incredible. There's programs with 100% employment rate. Other programs have 300% increase in earning power. So what we want to do is celebrate those programs as well. And so they're called the Strong Workforce Stars, and they're searchable on the web. So there's so many things that once you start on this road of focusing on doing what matters for jobs and economy, it just unleashes a set of other set of innovations for system change. And everything that I talked about is available on our website right here on Doing What Matters. So thank you very much.